It's the third Saturday of the month, sort of. So we're here to talk about the latest TVGP Game Club. We had to reschedule, and I just have the intro all ready to go. It's in the chamber.
It's fine.
Yeah, it's okay.
Don't break the illusion, Boston. You're breaking the illusion.
I know. It's going to go live on the feed anyway. So we're here to talk about Thomas Was Alone, Mike Bithel's BAFTA award-winning Thomas Was Alone.
Thank you.
Let's get all the details of the game out of the way here at the beginning. Released June 30th, 2012, developed by Mike Bithell. Published by Mike Bithell or Curve Digital or Limited Run Games, depending on which version you have.
Yep.
It came out on PC, OS X, PS3, Vita, Linux, iOS, Android, Xbox One, PS4, and Wii U.
There we go.
And maybe Switch soon in the future. And if it does, go play it on Switch. Time travel Metacritic ranges from 77 at the low end on the PC release, all the way up to 88 on the iOS release. So it's...
How did the iOS one get a higher rating? Usually it's the inverse.
I feel like because it came out the latest, everyone's like, hey, it's Thomas Was Alone, that's great, indie game, it's whatever. So it probably controls really well too. I meant to play that version. OpenCritic did not have a rating for it because it came out too early.
Aww.
So they don't have it. Peers for the release date, Lollipop Chainsaw, which is a game I had completely forgotten about.
That's what I was playing at the time then.
Yep. Same.
Yeah.
I was playing the same thing, and also it's probably the most diametrically opposed to this game that you could possibly get.
Well, I've got another one here in the list. Number 3 is even more opposed.
Okay.
Second one was Pokemon Conquest. This is when Nobunaga's Ambition plus Pokemon on that 3DS game.
Okay. Move on.
That was weird. The most diametrically opposed one, Spec Ops: The Line, came out.
Oh, wow.
Ooh. Yeah.
Thomas Was Alone versus the Horrors of War.
Thank you, by the way, because I was thinking about that game the other day, and I could not think of the name of it.
Yeah.
And coincidentally, now I know the name of it.
Spec Ops: The Line is really good.
It's an amazing game.
Yeah. The Walking Dead Episode 2 Starved for Help came out, which is probably what we were mostly talking about on TVGP at the time.
Man, that was a dark game year, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Spelunky came out on XBLA, so it's like the second wave of Spelunky after its hugely important PC release, and then the remake, the kind of remake, came out on XBLA. Theatrhythm, Final Fantasy came out on 3DS. And lastly, another indie darling, probably one of the hardest video games you'll play, La Mulana, came out on PC.
Yep, nope, I'm good, thank you.
Yeah, that game is stupid hard. As we ask every month, top of the pile, middle of the pack, or overlooked? What do we think?
This is a difficult one.
Yeah.
Because I think the week it came out, this thing was overlooked. I think very quickly, like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks later, when people started playing this feels to me, especially at the time, I distinctly remember this being a word of mouth bomb, where it's like suddenly everybody is talking about it and everybody is raving about how good it is.
Yeah, because everybody's first impression when it came out was, oh cool, it's a puzzle game with shapes. Mm-hmm. Fantastic, thank you. And like, you're right, a couple weeks later, everyone's like, dude, you got to play that shapes game.
Yep.
It's not what it is. You just got to play it.
I just had a really hard time placing this game in a timeline period. Like, I didn't look it up while I was playing through it. And I was like, did this come out before or after the Stanley Parable? Like I know this was so critically well received, but I don't remember what year it came out. And I had to look it up today. And it's like, oh, this actually came out way longer ago than I thought it did.
Yeah.
And
I think largely because it kept... every time there was a new platform out, like a year later, Thomas Was Alone would come out on it. So it's like, it's always kind of coming out on something.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's break into what we liked and what we didn't like. Let me pull up my notes here. Who would like to go first about Thomas Was Alone?
I can go first.
Okay.
Specifically, Danny Wallace.
Yes, the narrator himself.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Well,
that was strange.
So, if you're watching the Twitch stream, I am Moonpir today.
Aha! Let me switch these guys around.
There we go.
Thank you, Jimbo Jangles.
Thank you, Jimbo. Oops. Thank you very much.
Sorry, completely distracted.
So yes, Danny Wallace, our narrator / everyone's favorite Assassin's Creed character to hate.
Yes. I have an unjustified unlike of Danny Wallace.
Right, okay, I remember, because you had talked about this
with Assassin's Creed relation.
Right, with Assassin's Creed, we were like, hey man, I don't like Danny Wallace.
Yes, and I'm not saying it's the right thing to do or whatever, but there's something about Danny Wallace that I don't like. It could be the things that he has allegedly done in the past. Nothing on the evil side, nothing on the current movement side, nothing on that side. Just some things about his relationship with his friends that I'm not a huge fan of.
Okay.
But the dude can read a story like nobody's business.
Yeah. Like, it's very much like Thomas Was Alone is what you get when you give a person who knows how to act this script.
Like, it's the same in Assassin's Creed. Like, in Assassin's Creed, he nails the really snarky know-it-all.
Yep.
He absolutely nails it. Also, it helps the fact that he has a quick appearance in the movie Yes Man, because he wrote the book Yes Man.
Interesting.
Because he did do that for a solid year, said yes to everything.
Okay.
He did it because he has been part of a different social experiment, which was, if you were a fan of stupid stuff that two friends do, go check out Are You Dave Gorman, which was a book. It later became a comedy kind of miniseries, documentary kind of thing, about Danny Wallace and Dave Gorman having a bet about how many Dave Gormans there are in the world.
Okay.
And then promptly setting out to find and handshake every single Dave Gorman they possibly can.
I should check this out.
You should read that book. It's a hilariously stupid two friends in college go on a life-changing journey kind of thing.
Right.
He does such an amazing job in this of different, not necessarily different voices, but different tones, different shifts, different perspectives for all the different shapes and sizes and stuff like that. He has a very good vocal range. And I think this game is the game that allowed him to show that the most.
Yeah.
Like, out of curiosity, anybody have a favorite cube?
That's tough.
Mine is Claire. I have to go with, I think it's Claire.
I need the name.
The blue one.
The big blue one who learns she can swim.
The superhero.
That one is pretty great.
It's either Claire or maybe Sarah, mostly because of how Danny Wallace voices Sarah, how she's like real high and mighty at the beginning, where it's like, I can double jump, like all of you back on the ground. Yes. And then because you're getting close to the end of the game, she softens very quickly.
Yeah, and she's like, oh, my fate isn't to be the hero, it's to support the hero.
Right.
I enjoyed Chris a lot just for how much of a jerk and bitter he was.
Yeah, I love it. Like, Chris's cube has the best character arc, which is, this should tell you how great this game is, folks, because we're talking about cubes that move around the screen, and they have character arcs.
Yeah, like a series of rectangles.
Yes, Chris starts as the biggest D-bag in the game, and it ends when like he falls in love with the bouncy one.
Yep.
And like he goes through this entire arc, and it's like a really heartfelt moments for that rectangle to go through, and that's all because of Danny Wallace. Like, literally, It's all because of him. Like, I made a note for this game, which was, this is essentially a puzzle platformer audiobook.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Like, I was going to say visual novel, but it doesn't feel right to call it a visual novel, whereas audiobook kind of sits in nicely because it's a short story, relatively compact, and like it's just read fantastically while you're making your way through these levels. Like, when I played it, I stopped if Danny was talking before I hit the portal at the end of the level. Yeah,
like you never want to go too far too fast because you don't want him to get interrupted.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I I had a hard time with this game in the beginning. I feel like the first 3 chapters are not great because a lot of them are like, here's your 3 shapes. You got the red, the orange, and the yellow, and you're kind of just stacking them on top of each other to get to portals, and like it's not super interesting. But once like 4.1 and 4.2 start, and sort of like, oh, okay, cool. Like we're starting to get some really cool puzzles here, and we're starting to get into a bunch of the meat of the story here. So I feel like that first hour was sort of like, okay, I'm sort of not getting the love for this quite yet.
Mm-hmm.
To me, I've been trying to think about how to talk respectfully about this game because it is critically acclaimed and it is much beloved. But there is, unfortunately, I have to be a little bit insulting to it. So they have a trailer, a joke trailer for a movie that's like a generic Oscar award-winning trailer, and they just have people saying like lead lady's name and movie catchphrase and like things like that throughout. And it's a comedy, and they just stuff it full of things that are really common to see in favorite movies that win the Oscars. Right. I feel like this is that for video games to a degree without that comedy aspect. Like it has that.
No, it makes perfect sense. Like it's
like when you say the
relatively
phrase.
Simple.
Yeah, sorry.
Go ahead. It's simple gameplay. You're right. It's got, for the lack of a better phrase, it's got the Oscar bait kind of feel to it. Like indie darling, music, characters, so on and so forth. You have
the kind of indie whimsical piano with the. I guess it probably didn't have any guitar in there. Now, come to think of it, but the it's a platformer, which is a hugely critically popular genre for indie devs to hit, and also like you think about like the big names like Braid was a platformer.
Right.
Like Super Meat Boy is a platformer.
I feel like Thomas Was Alone might have the Seinfeld problem, where if you didn't grow up watching Seinfeld when it was on, you have watched all the stuff that was influenced by it and sort of took that ball and ran with it, and you go back to watch Seinfeld and you're sort of like, okay, like yeah, it's funny, but like these 5 other things did this same thing even funnier. And it's like, well, yeah, but here's like the germ where it began, and I feel like maybe you're having that not issue but that experience with Thomas Was Alone, where it's like, yeah, I get it, but like
that's a really
7 years ago.
That's an amazing analogy because I hate Seinfeld,
right?
And I did not grow up with Seinfeld,
right?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with that comment. Like, because I was thinking that while I was like not of Seinfeld, but just of. Maybe this game would have meant more to me had I played it when it came out. You know, maybe this is the Seinfeld or the Neuromancer or something that does everything that everyone else did. Like, and I know I mentioned Stanley Parable earlier. Like, Stanley Parable for PC as a mod for Half-Life 2 came out before this, but the Stanley Parable that everyone played didn't come out till like a year after this, in like I think 2013.
Oh, okay.
So when I started playing this, I'm like, oh, this is like Stanley Parable, but not as good as Narrator. Like,
oh, right? Yeah, they feel like they share similar DNA.
But it's that, and I think also part of it too is like both games use kind of this. I'm pretty sure I don't know if this is the actual thing to call it, but this is what I've been calling it. I call it the comedy of manners. It's that kind of overly polite English kind of comedy drama.
I have no idea what you're talking about, young man.
It's the
right.
It's the pardon me, sir. I don't appreciate what you're saying when you really, to tell them to F off type thing,
It's like the exact reason why you get an English person to voice actor game, because like there's that, it carries that thing, like it carries that weight to it.
It has that academic feel. And it makes the jokes have a certain tone to them. Like I think of the Jonathan Strange TV show and book. I forget what it's called, but anyway, it doesn't matter. It's another one that I would throw in that area. I think like Jane Austen books probably fall in that area, but I may be wrong because I've never read one, so I don't know. Anyway, I think I mostly enjoyed the game, despite me not particularly liking platformers a lot. I appreciated moving between the rectangles. I appreciated that I didn't like.
It wasn't a platforming puzzle. It was more of a puzzle that involves platforming.
Exactly.
Right.
And the puzzles were such that I didn't have to spend hours pining over. It wasn't like I really liked The Witness, but I was never going to solve that game.
Right.
I haven't even started that. I don't even.
Witness was like my game of the year that year, and we didn't finish it. So like, don't feel badly.
It's a cool and whatever game, but this was a nice game that I could solve the puzzles for, feel semi-clever for, and like it was really good at like the starting position of the blocks hinted at what you should do in the puzzle. Like almost through the whole game up until like I think one of the last levels I remember getting to, and it starts you off with like 4 blocks and where you're jumping through different colors to give them those attributes. And it starts you out with certain colors. And I found by changing everyone to 2 specific colors, it was a much easier level than whatever maybe they had intended for me to do. I'm not sure. But I felt like the game communicated with the player on what it wanted you to do really well. I think it's probably like my favorite thing about the game, honestly, which I think is a huge compliment.
Yeah, on top of that, I think some of my favorite puzzles from the game were ones where there were a couple sort of in the back half of the game where it's just one big cube, and you have like 7 different characters all in the cube, and you can tell it's this almost this Rubik's Cube thing where it's like this person needs to push this button, and then someone on the lower right will worm around somewhere to do something. And I liked those like self-contained levels. They were less about the journey from top to bottom or left to right. They were more about here's this one screen, it has this one puzzle you need to solve. I thought those were cool.
Come on, Boston. The journey's about going right and up. Come on.
That's right. Up and to the right.
Yes.
So I really enjoyed it with the main cubes, and then when we're spoiling everything. Everyone knows that, right? So
yeah, spoiler territory.
When they switched it for the last, I don't know what to call them, the last 10 scenes, the scene 9 or whatever it's called. I question how necessary that whole arc was. Like that one felt kind of like they had the one guy who was bad, but he didn't seem
Gray
bad to
was
me
the
at
villain,
first, but he wasn't really a villain that the characters fought. He was just a villain that the dot cloud or whatever it was grabbed at the end randomly.
Yeah, the pixel cloud. Well, he was. So one of the things I think narratively that's really interesting about Thomas Was Alone is you have 2 storylines that are meeting in the middle. You have the narration part that you're playing, and then you have the text, the book excerpts and the interview excerpts that are happening at the beginning of chapters that are explaining what happened to the world after Thomas escaped the mainframe and what happened when AI started fighting for rights with other sentient creatures. And I think that's really cool, but I sort of wish they helped tie those 2 together a little bit more on your first playthrough, at least.
To me, this game feels, and I've said it a couple of times about a couple of games here and there, but this to me is a prime example of a game where the game was built, the mechanics were done, and the story was written around that. Now, it helps in this case the fact that the mechanics in the gameplay are relatively simple. They get a little bit wishy-washy and a little bit complicated at the end, but generally speaking, this feels like a similar kind of feeling to Braid. I've never played it, but from what I understand, that game was built basically from like mechanics-wise before anything else was really in. Like they had.
Can't believe I've never played Braid. I'm going to put that on our game club list.
Yes,
here.
I've never played Braid.
It even started
for everyone listening at home. I'm adding it to our list. Right, Braid.
Braid came out right around the same time as Super Meat Boy, I believe, and I chose my one of the 2. It was Meat Boy.
We didn't have Game Pass back then.
No, we didn't.
Couldn't play everything.
But it feels like it feels like this story was written around the actual mechanics of the game.
Right.
And it just so happens that, unlike when this normally happens and it's a hot garbage of a story that just whatever kind of thing, this is probably one of my favorite stories in a game ever.
Yeah,
because it perfectly suits the level design. It perfectly suits the progression, and like we talked about at the start, they give little shapes and colors a full character arc and personality and stuff like that, which is not reflected in the gameplay.
And it's also, none of the characters themselves speak. It's all based on the narrator relaying the characters and how they feel in their relationships.
Mm-hmm. And like it's executed so perfectly. And the one thing I will say about like MusiM was talking about that last chapter where all of a sudden you've got the merging of abilities.
Yeah.
The narrative reason for that is a chef's kiss moment where it's like, okay, the original architects have sacrificed themselves so that their DNA essentially carries on through future generations of AI and tweaks them to allow them to progress further and eventually escape the actual system.
Once Thomas got out to the internet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So something I was really surprised about on the game, because I had always heard what everyone else did. Oh, it's a really well-written story about, rectangles. And so what I was not expecting was, like, the art and animation in this game exists and is really good. Like, I was thinking this would just be an indie pixel thing like VVVVVV or something like that. That's
1,001 spikes where it's just a cube jumping over some stuff.
Like, it's really rough looking and it would just be written well. I wasn't expecting as high of production value on the art and narration. I wasn't expecting the cubes to have any sort of animations to them.
Well, and there's a lot of really great lighting, like when you're opening up passages that are above you, especially as you get closer and closer to the fountain, which looks really great. Like, there's a lot of great lighting coming through the environment. It's sort of like, this is more than the game really needed, but it really adds something to it.
And the little diamonds you get, like, those had light reflecting off of them. That I thought was really cool, that your blocks could block. It was I just didn't, for someone's first game, this is just so hugely polished. Like,
and it's funny because I was reading some interviews and he's like, I made a prototype during a 24-hour game jam, and then I made this game because I wanted to learn how to write stuff in Unity. So I made Thomas Was Alone. It's like, come on, man.
Yeah,
this is too good. You can't just say, like, I just wanted to learn how to program Unity. So it makes it sound like you just pooped out nothing, but you made an incredibly great narrative game.
And not only did he program, like, okay, let's make a platformer mechanic. We'll make a platformer mechanic where you press a button and you switch the thing you're controlling on screen. Now you're going to press a button and switch which direction the physics go for this other character who is completely reversed. Like, I mean, I guess that was probably not as... Now that I've said that aloud, that probably was just like... what do you think? Like, they put a negative number in front of everything else.
Yeah.
It probably is as difficult as I think, but it sounds difficult to me.
It's impressive for a game that... I think this is what I think of... Thomas Was Alone is what I think of when I think of a really great indie game, is that it is a game that does something simple and then starts to peel back the layers. We've been talking a lot about Braid. Braid does time mechanics, and then that's the first level, and the second level is another time mechanic, and the third level is different, and like, it's still the same core mechanic, just like Thomas Was Alone, but you're sort of peeling layers back on it. And I think that is when... I think that's part of what makes Thomas Was Alone so incredible, is it's a story about a bunch of shapes that jump. Jumping rectangles. But it's about way more than that, and the puzzles are way more than that in a way that... Sure, it's still a bunch of jumping rectangles, but it's so crazy good.
Mm-hmm.
In a way that I still didn't expect, even after so many people, Moonpir, you included, talking so highly about this game. I still didn't not that I didn't believe, I don't think I understood how good it was gonna be.
Yeah. And honestly, like, I didn't even know this thing came from a game jam. Like, I'm super appreciative that thing exists now, because game jams have produced, some really jamming games.
Heyo.
Like, you saying that made me look it up, and it's like, I did not realize that Goat Simulator was a game jam game.
Yeah.
Gods Will Be Watching was a games jam game. Super Hot was a games jam game. Snake Pass was a games jam game. Like, so many small little ideas that Celeste, Surgeon Simulator, like, game jams. Like, I didn't realize how interesting that snippet of an idea, see if it works, because it's the positive and the negative about the size of the video game industry. You take a company like EA, you give them one studio, or Microsoft, you give them one studio, you say, make 6 prototypes, we see what sticks. That process takes 6 months to make 6 prototypes, different games, see what feels good to play. You take a game jam, you give a bunch of indie developers 48 hours, 24 hours, whatever it is, and look at some of the gold that's come out of it. And yeah, there's trash that's come out of it too, but...
Sure, but someone's making something.
Yeah, but these people who make these, like, game jams and then release something on it generally know when they've hit something positive.
Right.
And Thomas Was Alone is a really good example of that. That's an idea that probably came together really quick, but the execution...
Well, his original idea for it was a pairing of... He wanted to make a game about friendship, and he wanted to see if you could make a game out of Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?, where all the brothers are tied together and they have to work together to solve their problems. So what if you put the two of those together, and that's Thomas Was Alone.
Yep.
Well, and just on the topic of game jams too, like so none of these games that we mentioned look anywhere near like they did after the game jam. Like, they probably had a
definitely
barely functional level. There was probably little to no animation. Who knows if there was music in it? But like, game jams are one of the most positive things and like life affirming things like I've ever been to in my life. And I went to one only knowing how to write music, not knowing how to make any games, and it was an amazing experience. And I highly recommend anyone who is even just remotely thinking about it. Like, most of these game jams, especially like Global Game Jam in January, like a lot of these are open, and most of the indie devs, like, you can just show up and hang out with them and learn how to make a game with them and brainstorm.
Right. Or like if you do art or music or something, like, you will find someone that will do something. Or there's local game jams, or some of my favorite ones are ones that have a theme where it's like, we're gonna make this game jam about cats, and just make something that has to do with cats.
Well, the Giant Bomb game jam is always hilarious.
Yes,
the stuff that comes out of that.
Yeah.
Well, and like the Global Game Jam one, they like, it's a worldwide event. They have hosts in like hundreds of cities around the world, and it all works on a, like, you aren't allowed to post what the theme is until all the locations have started, and they will tell you the theme for that year. Like, this last year, the theme was home. Like, the year before, I think the theme was transmissions or something like that, and just the directions people go on that are pretty astounding. But I'm sorry, I'll quit hijacking our podcast and talk about it. This is just to say, if you even remotely interested, you know, I know not every city is going to be the same with friendliness, but I would be surprised if you didn't have a local dev community, if you lived in a decent sized city that was very supportive and very ready to get you going. And at the end of the day, even if you don't want to program, do art or music, everyone needs someone to play and test their games. And everyone at a game jam would love for you to come by and play it, so they can watch you play it, see where you get stuck, see what they need to improve.
Watch you break it. Yeah.
I mean, that's something that I've always heard. Like, I've always heard nothing but positive things. Like, the video game industry can be a very dark, very negative space. Not just the companies running the games, not just the practices involving loot boxes, but also sometimes, generally speaking, video game fans can be horrendously terrible people occasionally.
Yep.
Well, sorry.
Shout out goes to video game fans, wrestling fans, and anime fans for being the worst human beings of all time.
The trifecta.
Yes. I am one of all three, so that's great news for me. Someday I'm going to start.
I mean, keep seeing pictures of sports fans burn cars, so it may just be fandoms in general.
That's fair.
But it's like it's a supportive space is what I hear every time I hear people talk about game jams. It's like, oh, well, your artist didn't show up. Well, here you go. Here's 2 other teams. Their artist's going to do some work for your team as well, just because you don't have an artist anymore. It's like nothing but support for each other, and that's kind of great.
Well, I mean, you show up, you stay probably in a building or a room with the other teams there. You are probably working with people you've never worked with before. You have resources that you can talk to anyone in the room for ideas or to move around or to share assets or whatnot. You don't have a company expecting you to make dollars out of something. All you are there doing is, hey, I have a fun, stupid idea. What do you guys think about this?
Right.
You slowly try to whittle it down to one mechanic and something you can make in a couple days, you know? It's awesome.
Yeah. All right, any closing thoughts about Thomas Was Alone? We talked a lot about rectangles and how good this game is.
Yeah, I genuinely love this game. Like,
yeah, me too.
I played through it twice. I think I played through it once a while ago, and I again recently 4,000 games ago. Thank you very much, Thomas Was Alone.
There you go.
For this episode, I actually just watched a no commentary full playthrough. Which, guess what? It's like an audiobook.
Yeah.
And it's like watching it, like seeing like some of the puzzles reminded me how I solved them and how I did things like that. But then it's like, yeah, I remember this moment and I remember the story and I remember that thing and like that.
Apologies for this bird.
I barely can hear it, dude. You're fine.
Okay.
The game plays so simply but does such a good job. Sorry to do this, but it reminds me of Edith Finch. Very super simple gameplay, which is brought way above that gameplay with the story, with how it hooks you in, with things like that. Like Edith Finch, if you took the story out of that game, you'd just be like, okay, yeah, whatever. But that thing is made or break on its story, and I feel Thomas Was Alone is the same. You give me the rectangles, that's a cool puzzle platformer that I can get an easy 1,000 gamer score in. You give me the story, the AI, the future, the past, the present, the whole thing all kind of mixed in together, and it's like, okay, now you've made a game that's potentially a game changer.
Yeah, I really like the game. I don't think I love it as much as you guys, but I also just think I missed that window, and sometimes I can create that appreciation in myself. Like I still appreciate, like it's still an extremely well made game, but it also has it's really just me, not the game. I'm just
right.
I did enjoy the narration. It kind of made me want to play Stanley Parable more, and more excited about that Switch release coming up. But like, despite my ragging on the soundtrack for being stereotypical indie game music, maybe not indie movie music, really. Like it still is a good soundtrack. It still fit the mood of the game. It was, I thought it might a little like over dramatic at times, but I think it still worked. And I am of the opinion that you probably already own this on something and don't realize it, so you may as well spend 3 or 4 hours and play it.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. I think it's a fantastic game, and I wish I had played it sooner, but I'm very happy that we're continuing to do Game Club to play more great games that we have missed.
What platforms did we all play on, by the way? Something we
PS4.
PS4.
Xbox One.
Okay. Let's talk about our next game then, chosen by you, the patrons. We're going to play Grow Home, which came out on PC and PS4, and is that it?
I believe that's it, yes.
Okay, because I think the second one came out to a lot more platforms.
Yes, the second one, because it was I think Sony ponied up some of that indie money when the PS4 was first launching to get Ubisoft, I think it is, to make it a PS4 exclusive. I think it's a Ubisoft game.
I believe so, yeah. All right, yeah, so we'll play Grow Home. We'll have a month to play that guy, or robot plant climbing something. We'll find out in about 4 weeks.
I feel bad because MusiM's got to play another platformer.
That is just the nature of this podcast. I enjoy podcasting with you guys and talking about games too much to do more than remind the audience that I'm really not fond of platformers. Please don't hate me for it.
Yeah, unfortunately, Dream Daddy was the one I was hoping was going to win, and it just missed out by 1 vote. So
yeah, I got mine. Yeah. I'm so disappointed.
Yeah, it'll get on the list someday. So, all right. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening. We'll see you all next month.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.